Hello, everybody, and welcome to Christian Fiction Fans. Today we are talking with Aleah Donald, the author of Escaping the Shadows that we have read this month. And so let me tell you just a little bit about Aleah. Aleah is an indie author with a heart for storytelling that reflects faith, healing, and real life struggles. She writes fiction that places Christ at the center while capturing the complexity of human emotion through authentic, relatable characters. For every novel that she writes, she works to uplift and encourage readers through honest and grace-filled stories. She's a Christian wife, writer, and foster mom. She loves her godchildren and her large family. Aleah resides in South Carolina with her husband and their beloved dog. So welcome, Aleah. I'm not hearing you, Aleah.
Oh no.
Oh, now I can. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me join.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here. So I would love it if you would just start by telling us a little bit about your journey to become an author. Is this something that you've always wanted to be? What prompted you to start writing?
So I have been writing since I was a little girl. You can ask my mom when we got our first computer. I would spend hours and hours just making up stories. It's always been something that I've been passionate about. I knew I was going to be a writer, since elementary school.
Wow.
Um, Yeah, it's been a very strong passion of mine. So I've been writing for years. I have hundreds of stories that are unfinished sitting
Mm,
on my computer. There's a lot of stories that I've lost over the years. But that's always been a passion of mine.
interesting. So you've been writing since you were a kid. You say hundreds of stories. How many of
Yes.
those would you say are like almost novel ready, like this one that we
None
read?
of them.
None of them.
None of them. I get an idea and I get passionate about it. I write, and then I get another idea, and then and then the process just kind of starts over. So this was actually the first book that I have fully completed.
Okay. And why this story? What was it that, I don't know, gave you inspiration to think, let's write a story about a really heavy subject about abuse?
Mhm. So I want to say that all of my books that I've written, even from a young age, have been about serious topics. It
Okay.
just kind of correlates with my childhood, the things that I've witnessed, the environment that I grew up in. So I've always wanted to write something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just praying to God because I knew I wanted to publish my first book. I had no idea which book I would actually choose because this was an original idea. So I didn't know which book I was going to choose. And this one kind of just stood out to me in my time with God and prayer. And just started writing and it just kind of came to me. So it is a very
Excellent.
hard topic.
Yeah.
Um, it was very hard to write about it. But I know that there are a lot of women who experience relationships like this, and
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of churches that don't actually talk about domestic violence.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring awareness to that while also kind of, showing people that there's hope after the storm and after your
Mm-hmm.
situation. So,
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you are giving a voice to that because we don't always like to look at the not so pretty parts of life, of any of our lives. We like to only show online the things that are lovely. And so to be able to bring a voice to these things that, I mean, your character, and I think it's true for many women are afraid to tell others about it. And so, for them, if someone has gone through this, to be able to read about it, I think it really would make them feel seen. So, I think it's a great topic. So, do you have any other heavy topics out there that you're hoping to write about in the future or have
I
started?
have, yeah, I have a lot of heavy topics. I think that's kind of where God is calling me in my writing journey. It's just to continue shedding light into the situations that people don't often talk about. I'm working on several different novels. I'm not sure exactly which one is going to be the next book, but I'm talking about divorce, which is something a lot of people don't talk about,
Right.
miscarriages. There's just a lot of topics that I'm trying to focus on.
Good. Good for you. So in this book, which came first in the inspiration? Did the characters come to your mind, or was it more like I know kind of the plot and what that story is supposed to be about?
So the plot definitely came first.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the original draft, I know you were one of my beta readers,
Yeah.
but if you read the very first original draft, um, it's a completely different story. So the plot came first, and then the character came along, and she kind of just drove the rest of the story. I typically start off writing about the idea, and then once I have the character, and I develop them and I figure out what their end goal is. They kind of drive the rest of the story and the decisions that I make. I like to put myself into that person's shoes.
Okay. So knowing you wanted to write a story about domestic violence, what did you want your character to be? How did you decide about her characteristics? What did you think she needed to have as part of her character?
I think one of the main important things I wanted to show was someone who had hope. She's very hopeful in the beginning of the relationship. Things are going, great originally, and then it kind of goes downhill from there. But one thing I wanted to show was a character who never lost hope. And I think I showed that well with Asha. I know that the other thing I wanted to show was community. People always ask, why don't they just leave the relationship? Why do they stay? And I wanted to show people that majority of the time, the reason they don't leave is because they don't have financial resources and they don't have community. And so I wanted to make sure that I gave Asha, she had the financial resources when Malachi helped her with the job. And then she just had her community, her friends. She didn't have any living, any family that she was connected to in the story because her mom had passed. And then she had her daughter, but she did have a community that she was able to lean into. So that was my main goal that I wanted to show with this character.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's true. I think you portrayed that really well, that she was really being controlled by
Yeah.
her boyfriend in kind of forcing her not to have a job, and so then she was dependent on him. And when you're in
Yeah.
a situation like that, that makes it a lot harder to
Yeah.
leave the situation. And I think abusers know that.
Right. So then the question becomes, if she didn't have her best friend, if she didn't have Malachi, would she have left? Would
Right.
she have stayed? And what would the outcome have been at that point?
Yeah. Yeah. So you work in social work. You're a social
Yeah.
worker, correct? Um what is your kind of specialty area right now? You're in
It's
foster
called
care?
no, it's called family preservations. So
Okay.
we kind of help reunify the family and keep the family together.
Okay. So have you ever worked in situations where families are experiencing domestic violence then?
Yes, often, very often. It is something that I see all the time. I want to say that it also had, something to do with the story that I picked, because that is something that I see a lot. And a lot of the times, the woman always goes back because she does not have community, she doesn't have family. And we also see men in that situation as well. So it is something that I see very often. I have a family member also who kind of, experienced something along the same line. So I was able to talk to her about what that was like because I've never been in that position before, but seeing it firsthand from, my clients, from her, and just doing a lot of research, I think I was able to pull together Asha's character.
Yeah, I thought you did a beautiful job. I really enjoyed it. So choosing these stories that have heavy themes you've been called to do, how do you approach a heavy subject like this, making it believable, but not making it too graphic, violent, depressing?
That was a very hard thing to kind of figure out, because I did not have a lot of sensitivity readers to the novel. And there are some people now who will not read the book because it is very sensitive for them. When they get to those parts of the story, it's like, they don't want to continue reading, which I understand. It is very heavy especially if you've experienced that before. So my goal was to kind of show a lot of the emotion to allow the reader to feel what it's like to be in that situation. But I didn't want to do it so much to where it would pull the reader out of the story. So it was hard trying to find that balance. I had to rewrite a lot of the scenes several different times. I had to read it out loud, read it to others just to get their thoughts on it because it's easy to make those scenes very graphic because it is graphic for a lot of people. The things that I've seen and witnessed and heard, it is very graphic. So I tried to just kind of stay on the borderline of it without trying to go too deep. So that's why if for those who've read the story and for those who want to read the story, I don't show too many scenes that are like that, but I think there's two scenes that are kind of heavy. And then the rest kind of shows you what does it look like when that relationship is turning abusive. So I tried to focus more on that.
Yeah, I love that. It's showing the emotion that still brought us into the
Mhm.
story without having to show every act of
Yeah.
violence. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So, truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. Are there any scenes or characters that were inspired by something in your real life?
Malachi is it kind
Okay.
of inspired by my husband.
Oh, I love it.
Um, he is very protective. He's just very protective and he's kind. When I wrote Malachi, I had some of the characteristics of my husband in mind. And I just wanted to make, when people read the story, I wanted them to feel safe with him. And that's
Yeah.
how I feel with my husband. So Malachi is inspired by him. Um,
Oh,
yeah. And then there's Zara, Asha's best friend. I want to say she's kind of like my sister, my twin sister in real life. Her character is kind of inspired by her. We are very
okay.
close. She can read me like a book if something's going on. She knows.
Uh-huh.
So yeah.
Oh, I love that. So, your sister must be really creative and
Yes.
artsy.
Yeah, she is. And then Irene was actually inspired by my mother-in-law.
Oh,
Yeah, she's into, she just kind of reminds me of Irene, how protective she is, always stepping in to take care of you. That is her love language. Anytime she visits, it's always like, she's always finding something to do with the kids and helping clean up and cooking for me. So she is definitely inspired by her.
sweet. So tell us a little bit about how your faith influences your writing.
I think my faith influences my writing, majority of the time. Um, Without my faith, I don't really think that my stories would come across the way that they do. I let God, I let, the knowledge from the Bible, I let all of that influence my writing. So I try to make sure the stories remain biblical, but I also want them to be realistic. You have people in the Bible who are not perfect. I don't want my characters to appear perfect. I want them to have flaws. I want them to have things that they struggle with. And that becomes the hard part when you're writing a story that you're, promoting as Christian fiction because it's going to have things in it that people may not agree with, that people may
Right?
consider a sin or, things along that line. But it's real life. It's what
Yeah,
we go through. You have Christian women who get divorced. You have, people who have abortions. And that's the kind of heavy topics that I want to go into. I don't want to glorify the sin. I don't want to glorify the trauma or anything like that. I want to point people who are lost and people who have a story to tell. I want to make sure that it all points back to God.
I love that. Yeah, and we are all imperfect people. We've
Yeah.
all got problems we're dealing with. And I think
Mhm.
there's such power in being able to see ourselves in a story that helps give hope that
Right.
even though it's a fictional character, if they went through it and got through it, I can see how
Yeah.
there's possibility there for me to
Mhm.
get through my thing.
Yeah, because I did have a lot of people who read the story who have, been in Asha's footsteps before, and they were able to relate to the character, and it actually gave them hope for their own journey because some of them have not remarried, they have not given love a second chance. But I wanted people to know at the end of the story that is a possibility. It's there. So that's kind of why the romance comes at the end of the novel. It's not really so much, throughout the entire thing, but there is second love at the end of her story.
I love that. That's beautiful. So, you're a really busy woman. You're a foster mom. Can you tell us a little bit about your foster kids?
Yes. So right now I do have four foster boys. They have been with me, and all four of them, it will be 2 years this summer.
Wow.
Yeah, two of the older ones are siblings, and then I have two of the younger ones who are siblings. So, I've been a foster parent for almost 4 years. It's definitely a journey. And it's very rewarding. Um, a lot of people don't realize what it takes and what goes into being a foster parent. So it is very rewarding at the end of the day.
How old are the boys?
So the older two boys are 7 and 8, and then the younger two are 3 and 4. And we are actually in the process of adopting the 3 and 4 year old. So hopefully we will have that done this year.
Fantastic. So
Mhm.
you're a foster mom of four, and boys are
Yeah.
wild. And I had four
That's-
boys myself, so I can attest to that. And then you're working a full-time job, and you're a wife and a dog mom. And how
Mm.
in the world do you fit writing into this life of yours?
I honestly have no idea. I can't tell you. It's really just the strength of God because it's hard to find the time to write when you have all these appointments to go to, all of these activities on top of church because we are very involved in our church. My parents are pastors, so we are also working in that field, and then working at DSS. It's a lot to work there in itself. Um, and it's a lot that's required of you. Being a wife, it's a lot that's required of you. My dog requires a lot of attention and love. So I mainly try to wake up early in the mornings. After the kids are up for school, I try to spend a little time writing before work. I'm writing on my lunch break in the car. I'm writing on the weekends. But you have to kind of find that balance because I may, set aside time to write. And then my 4 year old comes and he's just sitting on my lap, all in my computer, like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, mommy's working. So, but it's just finding that balance. Even with my husband, he understands how passionate I am about writing. I write every single day. I
Wow.
don't care if it's one sentence or it's a paragraph or 10 pages. I'm writing every single day.
Wow. That is discipline, and
Yeah.
that's what it takes to finish a whole novel. So
Yeah.
kudos
And
to
it's
you.
really, yeah, it's really just the love of writing. I don't think
Hmm.
I could live without writing. I'm very, very passionate about it. My mom, she'll tell stories now that I'm published. She'll tell anybody that will listen how much, time I spent writing, when I was younger. But it is something that I'm very passionate about. When people spend a lot of their time in their life searching for their purpose, and it's like I already knew.
Yeah.
I already knew that that was mine.
Yeah. So I'm so curious, since you have seems like always known that writing is your passion, why did you choose for a career to go into social work?
Um, that is a very good question. I've always wanted to do something with criminal justice. I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to do a lot of different things. And me and my mom joke about it now. I think the reason is because I wanted to write about all these different
Mhm.
characters. I wanted to get the experience of being a doctor and, everything. So I did, I just love criminal justice. I love psychology. That was my minor. And I wanted to go a different route with it, but I ended up at DSS while I was still in college. So
Okay.
I kind of just stayed there and
Yeah.
just kind of worked my way up to a different career field. So
Yeah. So in college, did you take a lot of extra writing classes because that's your passion, or?
no, I didn't. I did not. So college was actually kind of, I'm not a person that likes school. I
Mm.
didn't like the structure of it. I didn't like, it was just very different for me because my high school was kind of different. When
Uh-huh.
I was in high school, I was in an early college program. So I was already taking college courses my 4 years of high school. And so when I graduated high school, I graduated with my associate's degree. So I felt I was very burnt out by the time I finished.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to take a gap year. So I just kind of had to push through. And there was a lot of things happening while I was in college, losing loved ones, and I got married. So my mind was just kind of on finishing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I still wrote while I was in college.
Wow. That's really remarkable. Um, so tell us, were there any challenges that you had to face while writing this book, and kind of how did you overcome them to get the book out there?
There are a lot of challenges, and I can spend an hour or two talking about it. But like I said before, the book, if you read the original draft, the book sounds completely different from how it is now.
Hmm.
There were a lot of changes in the book originally. Asha was married to Russell. She did not have her daughter.
Okay.
But there and there were a lot of heavy scenes that I wrote in that book that I just did not feel was right for this book. So
Hmm.
I did kind of change some things. Malachi was still there. He was always going to be there. But the book is very different from how it is now. And I think one of the most challenging parts of writing, especially this book, because I knew it was going to be the first book that I published, are people going to love the book? Are they going to like it? What are they going
Yeah.
to think? From that point on, beforehand, I was the only one really reading all of my work.
Hmm.
So when you know that it's going to be out there for the world to see, it kind of makes writing harder because you want to conform to what everybody wants you to put in it.
Yeah.
Um, there were a lot of things that I changed and had to put back because people told me I don't like this, but that's what made the story unique. That's what made the story
Hmm.
mine. Um, so I think that was one of the most challenging things, just sticking to the story that God gave me. Um, and the ending is always the hard part for me with the book. I know the beginning, I know the middle, but I don't necessarily know how I want it to end. Um, because you want to give people the happy ending they deserve, but I
Yeah.
also want it to be realistic.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know if you remember or not, but originally the book, it ended with Malachi getting hurt, and that was the end of the book.
Yes.
There was nothing else.
I remember
Um, and my editor was like, nope. She was like, we can't do that. So, but that's kind of where I thought I wanted to end it. And then, it made sense for me to give her the ending she deserved after everything she went through.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's curious that in the original version, you had her married to Russell without a
Yes.
daughter. What was the decision behind having them just dating and having them have a child? Why did you change those details?
I think for me, because like I said, I have several different stories that I'm working on.
Hmm.
And I already have a story about divorce that I love. And so I didn't want to explore that in the same book.
Yeah.
And then the decision for her not, and for the decision for her to already have a child, I think it added more to the suspense, it added more to
Hmm.
the risk of her getting out.
Yep.
Because in the original draft, she ended up getting pregnant, and then she made the decision to stay because she was pregnant.
Hmm.
But I just didn't feel right about it, so I had to take it out and change it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that raises the stakes for her
Right.
having a child and makes her a little more tied down and dependent onto Russell for providing for her. So I like that. I think that was a good
Yeah.
call. So talk to us a little bit about how long did it take you to write the story? And it sounds like you're a very prolific writer, but how long, say, for the first draft of this particular story?
It's hard to say for sure because when I get an idea, I am working on it until writer's block comes up,
Hmm.
and then I stop, and then I kind of go to the next thing, and then I go back. But I want to say for this book, it probably took almost a full I want to say it took 4 months to do the
Okay.
first draft. And then I did not like it. And so I went back and I fixed it again. So in total, just about a year it took me to write the full thing.
Okay.
Um, I think that if I would have made the decision to change it earlier, it would have been a shorter time frame.
Hmm. And how many drafts did you go through to get it from
At least four.
at least four?
At least four.
Oh, that's
Um,
nothing.
Yeah, at least four. I always realize at least the first five chapters of my book, I know that I'm going to change.
Mm,
It's kind of just laying the foundation for me to start writing. Um, so I already knew that I was going to end up changing it later, but that kind of drives the rest of the story. And by the time I get to that fifth chapter, I know kind of where I want it
yeah.
to go. I have a sense of the character, what they desire, what's at stake. So yeah, it took me about four drafts to finally get to the ending because, as you know, I had Russell as a criminal, and there was a side plot that I went, down another path with, and it also was not time for that in this story. So
Yeah.
I am working on a part two,
Okay.
but it's slowly, slowly coming along.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to give the other people on the call here tonight a chance to ask any questions, and you can either put it in the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask Aleah anything that you have about the story.
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say that I really loved your book.
Well, thank you so much.
Anybody else have questions or comments for Aleah?
What was the finding a publisher like? Was it easy or did it take a lot to send in your manuscript in or what was that like?
So I actually self-published. I wanted to go the traditional route, but I didn't feel like it was in my best interest. With it being my first novel, I wasn't really sure what to expect because I had never gotten that far before in the writing process. So my editor, she was fantastic. She walked me through the entire process with publishing, and then Miss Deb, she also gave me a lot of wonderful advice because she already has a published book out. So I kind of just leaned into my resources with deciding to go that route. And I don't think I could have published a book.
He froze.
Yeah, because it about so they offered a lot of information for me.
You froze up for a minute
Oh
there.
no.
Yeah.
Okay, we can still hear you,
Can
but
you
you're
hear
picking.
me now?
Yep,
Okay.
we got
All
you.
right.
Yeah, so you just really leaned into the resources that you had
Yeah.
around you. And so, did you ever decide, hey, I'm going to try and find an agent and submit to publishers, or you just decided self-publishing was your route?
Just self-publishing was my route. I did a lot of research on what was best for me. And like I said, for the first book, I think that this is the best route. The second one, I will probably do the same thing. But at some point, I want to try to go the traditional route, but I want to make sure that I stay true to myself, that I stay true to my story. I hear a lot of people, they talk about, their agents make them take things out and change a lot of things, but I want that to be my decision, especially with it being a Christian novel. So I'll probably stick to self-publishing for a few books. Maybe somebody might see me and want to, you know,
Yeah, I love that. Okay, a few comments in the chat. Kirsten said she loved the book. It was very suspenseful and real. And then Stephanie wanted to know, how did you come up with the character names?
A lot of research. I think that's also one of the hardest parts for me to actually pick the names. And I have so many stories, and so I try not to reuse the same name over.
Yeah,
I don't know, it was something about Asha that just it sounded soft, it sounded pretty, Malachi sounds strong to me, Aiken sounds strong to me. So I kind of just typed in names and just looked down the list, put the name in, and just whatever worked, that's what I went with.
Yeah, I love that. Um, Kirsten also asked, would you ever want to be a full-time writer, or do you feel like your gift is both social work and writing?
I definitely want to be a full-time writer. I think that I contribute to, being a social worker, also being a foster mom. I think that's really where my passion is, being a foster parent, because there's a lot of things that go into seeing both sides.
Hmm.
And I want to contribute more to the foster care side of things. So I definitely want to be a full-time author. That is my goal. That is my dream. That's my passion. Also, while still being a foster parent, so I can still contribute in that way.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And when I first started writing my book, I talked to another author just to kind of get some help and get me started in the right direction. And at the time, I had a part-time job that I was going to, and she said, actually, that's probably better for you because when you're closed off all by yourself in in your little office typing away, no interaction with people, it just limits some of the creative juices from flowing. It's being out there and interacting with other people that you see people's characteristics and you see something that happened that just sparks an idea that then goes into a book. And I have lots of ideas from that job, but none of them have made
Yeah.
it into a book yet.
I am very introverted, so
Hmm.
I prefer not to communicate with people at all, really. I don't talk to a lot of people at work per se, but with my job, I do talk to my clients a lot. But
Sure.
outside of that, I really love just being in the story. My characters become real while I'm writing, and
Yeah.
I will reenact the scenes in my mind. I'll have
Hmm.
my husband. I'm like, hey, can you read this for me just so I can hear how it sounds? Does
Yeah.
this sound like something somebody would really say? So I actually prefer writing. I don't know. The stories just speak to me.
Yeah. Sometimes, though, even just people watching, you
Oh
see,
yeah,
even
I
if
do
you're
that a
not
lot.
interacting, you see things going down and you're like, well, that's interesting. Like
Yes.
just you see their personality and it sparks an idea.
Yeah.
A couple other things here in the chat. Okay, Stephanie put, were they special for any reason? And I'm not sure what you were referring to. So if you can give us more details there. But she also asked, some writers need to travel to the locations of their stories. Do you see yourself doing that for any of your stories?
I would love to. I go to Georgia a lot because that's where my in-laws are.
Mm,
So my next story is going to take place in Georgia.
okay.
I love Georgia. That it's my second heart. If I could move to Georgia today, I would. Um, but I love Georgia. So being there, that's kind of where my creative juices flow the most. I'm able to write several pages when we go to Georgia. So I definitely think location helps. When I'm at home, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of hard to get into that mode of writing because I see the clothes over here that need to be folded and the kids are running down the hall. So when I go to Georgia, I definitely get a sense of peace. I have my in-laws to kind of take care of the kids for a minute so I can just have some early morning writing time that I'm truly grateful for. So I definitely think
Yeah,
location helps.
I love that. Um, Kirsten said, I'm a mom through adoption and hope you will write some stories about adoption and or foster care. Is that one of your works in progress?
Yes. This my next story, the story that I think I'm going to publish. I don't want to say for sure because I don't know, but the story that I'm hoping I will publish next, it actually does lean into foster care, how um going through that as a child, how it affects you as an adult. So I'm hoping that I can make it into a series of three different women who have went through the foster care system and showing just how their lives are all different because, each story is different. How it affects you, it's different. So that's kind of what I want to show in my next story. So
I love it. Um, Also, if you're looking for some foster care and adoption stories, Katie Powner, who we had on our book group a year and a half ago. She has
Mhm.
a new one coming out in May or June, I think. She's also a foster mom. And so her book that's
Okay.
coming out is about foster parenting. So that would be another really good one. And so I don't know, just look up Katie Pounder. It has a cute cover with these little birds on a wire, but it can't come up with the title right now.
Okay.
But that would be a really good one. Stephanie asks, why or why not do you write Christian fiction?
So I write Christian fiction because I'm a Christian woman. I think that that is a huge part of my identity. It's who I want to be known for. I do a lot of things in the Christian community. So my story, and I've had people tell me that it's kind of just a women's fiction novel with Christian or faith themes. So either way you look at it, I want to mention God in my story. I want to mention faith in my story and prayer in my story. It's just a part of who I am when I go through my own situations. Um, Prayer is a part of my life. So I want to show people how they can still go through whatever situation they're dealing with. And at the end of the day, they can still pray to God. They can trust in God. They can believe that He's going to change their situation around. So that's mainly why I choose that genre. I used to love reading different kinds of genres. But a lot of them, even though I love the story, there were a lot of things that convicted me when I would read them, whether that's a lot of profanity or just scenes that I didn't want to read. So I wanted to give people something that's not really preachy, but it still has those themes in there where you can enjoy the story without technically considering yourself to be a Christian.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really what I've been looking for in books too, is I feel like we always talk about at church how on Monday, if you go to work and people ask you what you did for the weekend, sometimes you just pass over that whole Sunday thing because the people at work might not be of your faith. They might not really
Right,
understand. And so we kind of push that down and don't even mention, oh, I went to church on Sunday. And I felt like the books that I was reading were just like that. It's like they were great stories, but there was no faith in it at all.
yeah,
And for some people, some of those writers might not have faith, it might not be a part of it, but I really wanted to see just everyday people like me. They didn't have to
right,
be Amish or a pastor or, just
right.
regular people who use their faith to inform um, what they do and how they make decisions and how
Yeah,
they work through struggles. So I love
yeah.
that.
Because there were a lot of stories that I've enjoyed because I've been reading since I was, reading is a huge part of my life as well. I don't do it as much as I used to now that I am writing. But I wanted to read stories that were clean that I could recommend to a friend without saying, hey, well, there is a scene in there that I don't
That's
want to have
one
to worry
part.
about that. Right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Christian book, but I wanted something that's clean enough for me to read and enjoy without having to feel convicted for reading it or enjoying it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I look for in my books too.
Mhm.
Are there any particular authors or books that you have read that have been influential to you? Partly because we're always looking for new authors to
Mhm.
invite on.
Um, so I love Francine Rivers. That's
Mm,
one author that I'm just now being introduced to last year. So I just finished Redeeming Love. I started it and then I had to stop because that is a very heavy topic book as well. And then there's what's her name? Colleen Coble. I believe I'm
yeah,
pronouncing
yeah,
it
yeah.
right. She was actually one of the first Christian fiction authors that I started to read. And I love her. Her writing is very, very, very good. So I do love suspense as well. Um, I don't think she's a crit. Well, I think she does like what do you call it, like fantasy type
Okay,
novels. But her name is Kiera Cass, if I'm not
okay.
mistaken, if I'm not saying it wrong. But she has a series that I love growing up in high school. Um, but books, I don't know. I usually read books and then I kind of just see the author's style of writing, their voice, because it always fascinates me how people will say one thing and then I'm reading it and I'll know I would have described it this way. But it's
Uh-huh.
so good to see the different perspectives and the creativity that God has given somebody else. So I feel like I'm always inspired by every book that I read, even the ones that I don't typically like to read. There's always something that I can pull out of that book that inspires me with my own stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's a job hazard when you become an author, that everything you read, you kind of filter through an editorial lens a little bit. And so you're going, for me, people highlight things in books that they love, quotes and things. A lot of times I'm highlighting just these phrases of like, oh my gosh, look how they put those words together. It's not even an important part of the story, but it's just how they described something that I'm always just amazed at. But then by the same token, I kind of do the same thing of like, well, why did they phrase it that way? Or,
Yeah,
that I can see some of the mistakes now more than when I was just a reader that I
right,
could see.
right.
Yeah. So you've told us a little bit about what you're working on now. You think it's possibly going to be the one about adoption and foster care. What
I
other ones do you
think
have in the
so.
hoppers?
I have plenty, because I think I mentioned to you a couple of months ago that I was having severe writer's block. So even with the writer's block, I will write every single day. It
Wow.
may not be, it may not be the story that I'm going to publish,
Hmm.
but I want to make sure that I'm writing something. So, I do have a few stories. I think I'm going to tie them all into the foster care aspect of just, you know, having these young women, what their life was like beforehand as children and how they are now as adults. So I'm just trying to work through the kinks with that. Um, but I think that one of the stories that I want to write about, it's with divorce. Um, I think that's a huge topic that a lot of people, don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
It's not as heavy in some cases as domestic violence, but it is something that is very sensitive. And I want to talk about just how God can redeem a couple even after they've divorced. I do want to talk about infertility and miscarriages because you know my story, Deb, with my own journey through infertility. So I know I want to write a book about that. It's just not my time yet, to do that, but that is another book that I also want to release. There's so many different ideas that are out there for me. It's just making sure that I publish the right one, at the right time.
And will any of these be related to Asha and her story, any of the side characters that we met there?
No, I thought about that, but because my next book is probably going to be a series, I'm not going to do that just yet, but I am working on a part two on the backside for Asha.
Okay.
Um, I have a couple of ideas for that, so I am working on that. I don't know which one is going to come first because I'm kind of going between both stories. And whichever one, I finish first and can edit and, do a different draft, that's which one I'll probably go with next.
Yeah, very good.
Because Asha's story's not over.
Yes. Yeah, none of our stories are over, right? There's always another chapter.
Mhm.
So why don't you share with us what the best way is to connect with you further?
Okay. So I do have Facebook. I have TikTok as well. Both of those names, it's Aleah Donald. And my name is on the screen if you can see it, but if not, I can spell it. It's Aleah Donald. That's Donald, author. So it's Aleah Donald, author for the Facebook and TikTok account. And then you can also go to my website, which is aleahwrites.com. On there, you'll be able to subscribe to the newsletter, which I do have to get better about sending those out. But on top of trying to write and raising
Yeah.
four boys and working full time, it's hard to remember to get that done. But you can also, follow me there.
Yeah, so that would be a good way when the next book's ready. If we were on your
Yes.
email list, we would be able to find out. Awesome. And Kirsten said, yes, we need a second book about Asha. So
Yeah, I keep getting that. I'm trying to make sure that I go the right direction because I know sometimes people will say the sequel kind of flops or it loses its,
Mhm.
focus.
Yeah,
And I want to make sure that I don't do that. So I'm
yeah.
being very careful with the story because I know how people feel about Malachi and Asha. So I don't want to, I don't want to mess that up.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen some authors just do like a bonus epilogue that they send out to newsletter
One,
subscribers. So,
I actually had one. It
ooh,
was, yeah, but I took it out. I did. I don't know if you ever got to read it.
I
I don't
don't know if
know.
I did.
But yeah, I did have one in there. It was a year later.
Okay.
So I don't want to give away too many details of what was in it because it will be in the next book.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we better just wait for that then. Awesome. Well, does anyone else have any other last questions or comments for Aleah?
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in stories about foster care because I knew some people that fostered kids and a heartbreak they would have if they had to give them up. Um, have you had other kids that you've had to give up? And is that hard, or do you just feel that that a successful thing for them would be to go maybe back to their a family relative, or how does
Mhm.
that all work out?
So I've been fostering almost 4 years, and me and my husband are licensed to take sibling placements because they are harder to place together. So we are licensed to take in a group of siblings. All of our foster kids before the four that we have now, which we've had for almost 2 years, they've all gone back home with their bio families. And we've been very fortunate to be a part of that process. Always say it is like grieving someone, but they're still
Yeah.
alive. It's very, very painful. I remember the first placement that had to go back home. It was very traumatic. I did not know what to expect. Nobody told me that it was going to feel like somebody just passed away. That's the only way that I can word it because I don't know if you know, sometimes with DSS, they only really have to give you a 10-day notice, or sometimes they tell you the day of, and you're packing up that child's stuff and you sometimes don't even get to say goodbye. So it can be a very traumatic process. Um, and I just had to go through all of the emotions. I cried. I was also very happy because that was the goal. The goal is always for the children to return home if they can do it safely. Um, so it's a bittersweet moment. It was very hard though, our first placement. I remember each and every last kiddos that we had in our home. I remember their favorite colors, favorite food. And then me and my husband don't have any biological children. So after the placements would go home, we would have an empty house and it was quiet. And I'm used to hearing he hit me or can we get ice cream? And so it's kind of different. You have to kind of transition your mind from, having them here and now they're gone. And it feels like you lost a part of yourself, but it's always good just knowing that they're able to go back home. Some families like to stay in.
It froze again. Are you with us, Aleah? Well,
Where the best.
oh,
Oh,
we
I'm
lost you
sorry.
for a minute again. It
Uh-oh, I'm
froze up.
sorry.
Um, you said some families like to stay in touch.
Yes, some families do like to stay in touch and send you pictures, and they'll call you or add you on social media, so you can kind of see how they're doing. And some families don't want to remember that their
Yeah.
kids were in foster care, so it kind of just depends. But the 7 and 8 year old that we have now, it's one of the placements where you have to trust and believe that they would be successful and they would thrive in a different environment. And that's kind of a decision that me and my husband had to make. It was very hard to make that decision, but it is for the best because you have some kids who need more attention, they need more services, they need more medical care, things of that nature. So you have to be willing to be selfless. Because I want to be selfish and I want to be selfish and adopt as many kids as I can. I want everybody to stay, but it's not the right choice. So you have to kind of just trust God on when it is.
Yeah. Wow. That that sounds really hard.
Yeah,
I can
it's
imagine.
very.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Aleah, for sharing your story and about your book with us today. And I just want to remind everyone to please go and review the book wherever you purchased it. If you got it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever, just go in and leave some stars for her and maybe a couple of sentences because those reviews really help authors so very much. So thank you again, Aleah, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.